Hi friends, welcome back. Today I'm going to show you a painting that I've been working on for the last few weeks now that I've actually been doing for a friend of mine. I've actually only known her a relatively short amount of time. We met last year, but we've kind of just become very fast friends, and she has this spot in her house that she's been looking for a piece of artwork to go in there, and then she had a planned surgery for this year, so I haven't seen her in a little while, and I thought it would be fun if I just did a little painting for her to put in that spot in her house while she's in recovery as like a thing that she can come home to or something along those lines. So she also absolutely loves owls, and I thought to myself, you know what I really haven't painted a whole lot of is owls. So we're going to do an owl. And I've got some video of when I was putting it together, and I'll tell you all about it in a little voiceover video section thing like I do. If I'm being perfectly honest, I hadn't quite decided how I was going to film this video until I had already painted the sky, so that part didn't get filmed at all. I think I had an idea that I was just gonna finish the whole painting and do a really short video where I talked about it, but then, I don't know, it didn't feel like it was going to be enough of a video if I did it that way, and I did want this one to be a little bit more substantial, and the more I thought about it, I think my friend would also really like being able to see some of my process and how I put this painting together, so this is also a little bit for her, so she can have a little bit of, you know, like an accompanying video to go with the painting that is obviously for her. So the only thing that I knew I wanted to do with this piece was that I knew I wanted it to have some teal, and I wanted it to have an owl. Those were basically the two things that I knew she really wanted. The room that this painting is probably going in, as far as I know, is painted like a peachy pink, and a teal would just look absolutely lovely in there. And then my friend just absolutely loves owls, so it had to be an owl. But I started with more of a green tone, and then the more I looked at it, the more I thought I needed to add more blues to it. So I'm going back in at this point with a bluer tone just to bring it more into the teal and a little less green, more teal. I believe I started with Viridian green, and then I just used a deeper turquoise mixed with a little bit of blue. And I really like how that came out. And then here I added some violet to that color that I had already been working with, just to add a little bit more depth to this background hill. It felt a little flat before I added this. I think I also could have done this with oil pastels, but at the time that didn't really occur to me, and I'm also not positive that I have exactly the color I would have wanted for this spot. Which is the only issue I'm running into with the oil pastels at this point, is I am finding that there are some colors that I have that I don't use very often and that I would really like but that I don't have. So one of these days I will probably order more oil pastels. Just a couple extra colors, you know how it is. So then here I took that same shade that I used to cover that background hill, and I just muted it with some white. And I'm using that to just cover that really thin coat of Viridian that I had done on this foreground hill. And I think this turned out beautifully. I'm not sure that my camera is really picking up the color super well in this shot for some reason. I'm not sure that the camera really picked up as much of the hue of that color as I would have liked. I think I need to work on my lighting a little bit more. just to make sure that you guys can really see what the colors look like. I'll show you the final at the end, and you'll really see how pretty this color ended up, but in this shot it doesn't look as good as I would like. It would help if I painted during the day and used natural light, but I don't really have that option, so here we are. So now I'm adding in my tree, and I have this brown shade called Chocolate that I think just works really well for that twisty trunk style tree that I just love doing. So it was kind of a no-brainer because I knew I wanted to go with the twisty trunk tree. Oh, that's a fun statement. I knew I wanted to go with this style of tree, so this shade of brown just seemed perfect. My intention is to do an owl peeking out of a little hole in this tree, and I think with this tree being like that twisty trunk style, it makes it really easy to make like a crack basically between a couple of the twists. So I thought this would be a really fun way of doing this tree. I also had some new ideas for shading for this tree, and as you'll see coming up, I think they came out really good. I think this is probably one of the best twisty trees I've ever done. I don't really know what kind of tree this is, it's just the one that I paint, and I like it. I think one of the hardest parts that I have when I'm doing a big tree over a piece like this is that I really love how my skies turn out lately, and then having to cover part of it with a tree is just so difficult. And then obviously I've pre-drawn my sketch on this little canvas already, and my intention is to have one of the branches go over the moon, and that is so nerve-wracking. I really love how the moon turned out. I got the shading like exactly right on that thing, and even just the idea of putting a branch over it, I knew compositionally it needed to happen, but mentally I really didn't want it to happen. You can also see the lighting keep changing because I'm watching a show while I do this, and the TV is in fact to the left of the camera. I had so much fun working on this piece though. The whole time I'm working on it, I keep thinking I can't wait to give this to my friend and see the look on her face. I hope that she loves it as much as I do. I have already shown it to a couple of our mutual friends, and they all really like it. So I hope that it'll be a super fun little surprise for her. Well, not really surprise. She knows I'm painting it, but she doesn't really know what the composition or anything is going to be. It was just a really fun piece to work on. I don't often lately paint a lot of stuff that's outside my main like Fox and the Fairy series. So it was just really fun to paint something in that same vein without being in the same storyline, if that makes sense. I do have a bunch more characters and critters I want to add to that storyline, but these little owls will not be part of that. I guess stylistically it fits into that world, but thematically not really. The tree is definitely where I spent the vast majority of my time on this canvas. I know obviously that the tree is going to be one of the bigger focal points of this piece, so I wanted to make sure that I put in a lot of time and a lot of effort to make sure that this tree is perfect, and legitimately I think it came out really nicely. Sometimes I have a little bit of difficulty figuring out where I want to put my branches, especially in this style of tree. it's one that wants to go up more than it wants to go out, if that makes sense. So sometimes I have a little bit of, I'll second guess myself a lot doing these because there's a lot of options, but it's a little bit tricky to figure out what looks the most realistic, I suppose, would be the best way to put it. In the end, though, I do think it came out really nicely, and I'm happy with my branch choices. And you get a lot of camera angles of the back of my head while I'm doing this. I'm sure I've talked about this a few times too, but sometimes it is just easier to tilt your canvas and work on it that way. For doing the branches on the left side of the canvas, this was definitely much easier. With being right-handed, it's just sometimes you gotta tilt your canvas, and it is what it is. So the plan with the rest of this canvas, and I'm not going to show you this on camera because I could not figure out how to film it, but this is an extra deep canvas, so the edges are 2 inches deep. And my plan is that I have contacted some friends, I've gotten some Bible verses, and I'm going to paint each of the edges in a similar teal to what I have on the hills, and then I will use like a Posca marker probably, and I will write those Bible verses on there, and then I'll add some more paint to it to make it seem a little more like it fits in with the rest of the piece. I have a couple of different ideas for how I'll do that, so I guess you'll see in the finished video at the end of this how I ended up putting it together. But I think that it's going to be just a really fun and really uplifting piece for my friend to have in her house. It is going in her little prayer room, so adding scripture just seemed like the correct thing to do for that room. And getting the scriptures from various friends of ours was just, that was on my heart as the best way to go about it, so that it wasn't too much like, it wasn't too much me. Like, I know the painting itself is me, all the ideas and the composition and all of that is very much from me, but I wanted to make sure that she knew that, especially while she's in recovery after surgery, that all of us are thinking about her and all of us are praying for her, and that even though we can't really see her right now because surgery, she's still on all of our hearts. So that really made this a very fun and very special piece to work on. I hadn't really done anything like that before in the past. I think while I've done some pieces that have been for friends or family, there haven't really been any that are this heartfelt or this meaningful or that have like this much of a purpose or story to them, even while just being a cute owl painting. It more felt like a painting that I was doing with a purpose, which legitimately was really fun, and I am so thankful that I did this. As you can see now, I am adding in, or I have added in at this point, some of the additional texture to this tree, and you can see what I mean about it being just a little more realistic and having a lot more depth. One of my latest goals is just adding more texture and variation and movement into my pieces. I tend to paint things a little bit statically because that does tend to be how I like them, but I am really coming to see that adding this depth and texture and detail is just super important, and it adds a new layer to the art that I just really haven't had in my pieces before. So it's been really fun. It is very much a challenge to work with stuff like this and to not add a brush stroke where you shouldn't, I guess. But it's also really interesting because there's a really fun kind of push and pull between light and dark when you're adding in depth and texture like this. And I think it came out really nicely. Looking at it at this stage, it almost feels like I could have stopped right here and just added the detail into the actual hole of the tree to make it fit a little bit better. But as you'll see, I did not end up doing that. I added a lot of texture to this, and I hope that you guys like it as much as I do, because every time I look at this painting, I think I fall in love with it a little bit more. By the time this video goes live, I will have given it to my friend, but I will have had it in my house for, I think, a little over a week of having it finished before it goes to her. And legitimately, every time I look at it, there's just little details that I look at and go, oh, that came out so nicely. I actually spent a couple of days just looking at pictures of trees and looking at other artists' paintings of trees to figure out how exactly I wanted to highlight the hole in the tree. It's not a thing that I do very often. I don't do caves, I don't do tree holes, I don't do like burrows. So it's not something that I had really considered how to do before. It was definitely tricky. I do like how it turned out. I did a lot of layers on this section to make sure that it came out nicely. And like I said, it was a lot of just staring at reference photos and trying to figure out where exactly the light is hitting for it to look the way that it does. Because wood almost looks a little bit dead in the sections where the hole is. I mean, wood kind of looks dead in the first place. But there's a particular color and age to the wood, I guess, that I was trying to get with these colors. And I think that in the end it came out really nicely, but in the moment I found myself just kind of staring at it and going, I don't think this looks right. So I do spend a ton of time just working on this little tree hole. I think this video is sped up 2.5 times, if that gives you an idea of approximately how long each of these things is actually taking me. I did, of course, cut out a lot of the downtime and a lot of the me staring at reference photos time, but you get the gist and you get the idea. I did end up taking that light color a little bit farther in than I thought I would, and I think that helped. Because I did want the hole to look a little bit more like it was a tear, like the tree had twisted itself apart almost. And now here again I'm adding just a few more highlights just because we do have that bright moon right there, and I want to make sure that the tree is highlighted correctly considering the style and type of light that we have. It's one of those things that I don't really recognize when I'm doing it, just how much time I spend painting just a single section of a tree. But going back and looking at the video, I'm like, oh wow, I spent a lot of time on this tree. And it shows, I think. It shows in a good way. I really love how it turned out, like I already said. But it's just one of those that practice makes better, as they say. And I think that these techniques are really only going to get better with time, which is really fun to see. I was looking back on some of my older paintings from, 3 or 4 years ago the other day, and it's just been really cool to see the variations in what I've come up with since I've taken art more seriously and since I've really started to think of this as a thing that could be not necessarily a full career, but I guess you could call it a side hustle these days. It's really fun to see where your passion takes you over time. Because I think even those few years ago, I would not have imagined that I could paint a tree that looks like this. I really wouldn't. So here I'm taking a little break from that tree and I'm adding some lighter aqua green to give some highlights into the grassy ground, just to give those a little bit more depth too. Since the tree has so much texture, I was realizing that the grass needed to have a bit more texture too to make it seem like it fit in the setting here. So I'm just using a fan brush and some very wet paint. Very wet meaning I've mixed it with a decent amount of water, so it's pretty thin. And then here, as I always do with my trees, I am adding my signature sage green moss / algae / magical glowing bioluminescent greenery, because I think it just looks really cool and it adds a nice bit of depth to my trees. I kind of think of it as my signature move to add to trees anymore. If I don't add it to the tree, I feel like it doesn't look right. Which is funny because trees don't have this on them. I mean, they have moss, but it's not this shade and it's not generally bioluminescent. I do love how it turns out though. It just adds a nice pop of green and makes it so it fits in my world. And I love that. So we're getting close to the point that I'm gonna call it, because I did try to film my painting of the owls and my camera would not focus. But again, I will show you what this looks like in a little outro video, so don't worry. But I am glad that you guys got to see all of the painting of the tree itself. As you can see here, I've added in most of the leaves. And basically all that's left to do is the owls, which I will show you very shortly in a quick little outro video. But I hope that you guys loved watching me do this, because honestly, I loved watching me do this. I don't think I knew exactly where I was going with this painting when I started, or what I was doing 100% of the time, but I do love seeing how it comes out in the end, and seeing that it can come out so beautifully even when I don't necessarily know where I'm going. Yeah, I like it. Now, I realize that I didn't show you the actual painting of the owls. I was having a little difficulty painting them with the camera in the way. I'm still getting used to trying to paint with a camera between me and my canvas. It's tricky and I don't really like it. I'm gonna see if I can figure something else out where I kind of have my camera up and behind me so that I don't have to deal with this whole thing. But the painting is done and I think it looks beautiful. I absolutely love the little owl in the tree hole, whatever you call it, in the hole in the tree. I think it turned out super well. She was going for something teal, and I think that this will fit the bill. I think it'll fit really nicely in the spot where she wanted something. And then I did an extra little thing. We have a bunch of mutual friends, and I had asked them to provide different Bible verses that we could put on the edges of the canvas. So I have each side has a different scripture from Isaiah. that I just hand wrote on there with a Posca marker. And then I stippled, similarly to how I do the tree branches, I stippled on like a little pale pink, which I think will also really look nice in the room where she wants a painting. So I think this will be really fun. I think she's absolutely going to love it. I had a lot of fun putting this one together. I really like painting stuff for people that I know. I've done like little paintings for friends of mine. I've done the little ornaments. I've done a few pieces for my parents, but I think this is the first no, it's not actually. This is like the second bigger piece that I've done for a friend of mine. I've actually done a fox piece for some friends, and then of course I did those 2 dogs for my best friends, but I don't think those count because it's not my normal style. You know what I mean. I do think this turned out fabulously though, and I can't wait to see what you guys think and to find out what she thinks, because I just think it's so pretty. I think it turned out super well. I'm really happy with it. It was a lot of fun. I am legitimately thrilled with every decision I made. I only used a tiny little bit of oil pastels. I think I maybe could have done a little bit more, but at the same time, it turned out so well, it didn't need it. So here we are, 1 owl painting, 4 scripture verses, and I hope that my friend absolutely loves it, because honestly, I do. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in a couple weeks with a whole new video where we are looking at a painting that I'm putting together for one of those worlds that we put together a few weeks ago. It'll be fun. Bye, guys.